Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Aquastar Benthos Heritage 2. This watch is available from aquastar.ch in two versions. On the Tropic rubber strap, the price is €1,349. On the beads of rice bracelet, the price is €1,449 respectively. This piece is a heritage reissue of the original Aquastar Benthos 500, made in 1970, made to modern day specifications. I previously reviewed the Heritage 1 version, and as you can see, there is a size difference between the two. Aquastar produced the Heritage 1 in the original dimensions of the Benthos 500 from 1970, therefore it has a 42mm tonneau case diameter. However, Aquastar appreciated that many collectors prefer the contemporary case size of 40mm, so they have also released a Heritage 2 version, and that has a 40mm tonneau case diameter. In my previous review, I compared both with wrist shots and talked about the dimensions. In this review, I'm going to review the Heritage 2 version, and I'm also going to detail some notable differences in the specifications. So firstly, let's look at the case that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in this watch case, which is branded with Aquastar in their cursive text logo, and also the iconic Aquastar star emblem. Aluminium tube, and we've got a rubber cap which you remove, and inside there is a foam sleeve which you remove, and the foam sleeve splits into two halves, and there are two cutouts. In the top we have a cutout for the plastic warranty card, and in the base we have a cutout in the shape of a watch, which does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping from any damage. So this is the plastic warranty card. On the reverse, it details the terms and conditions of the 2-year international warranty. There's also space to fill in the serial number and reference number for the piece and the date of purchase. Also has the website, aquastar.ch. So to clarify, both the Heritage 1 and Heritage 2 versions are limited edition pieces. They are of 500 numbered pieces, and the serial numbers are unique because each of the 500 pieces has a unique number. This Heritage 2 version is number 18 of 500. I want to give due credit to Aquastar here because often mid-tier brands only cover their watches with a 12-month international warranty. And to clarify, mid-tier is €500 to €5,000 price point. 2 years of international warranty is the industry standard for mid-tier pieces, so it's good to see they have 2 years of international warranty versus 12 months. There is one item that's absent from this piece, and that is an owner's instruction manual in the form of a printed booklet with clear, concise diagrams and instructions in English detailing the operation of the movement used, which is the Solita Caliber SW200-1 automatic Elaboré grade. As an alternative to a printed booklet owner's instruction manual, I'd like to see Aquastar introduce a card with a QR code that could be scanned with an Android or iPhone, and that would download the owner's instruction manual. But nonetheless, good to see a warranty card included, and good to see it details the serial number. This is a numbered number 18 of 500 limited edition pieces. Now, as I've detailed, this piece is available in two versions, on the beads of rice bracelet, or alternatively a Tropic rubber strap. If the Tropic rubber strap isn't your personal taste, Aquastar also offer both the Heritage 1 and Heritage 2 with isofrane rubber straps, and they are genuine isofrane straps, and they also use genuine Tropic straps. If you look at the top right of the Tropic logo, you can see TM. TM denotes trademarked because this is a genuine Tropic strap. It's not a copy or a replica. Tropic straps were produced from the 1960s, and they were used on dive pieces such as the Benthos 500 produced in 1970, and they are designed in Switzerland and made in Italy. So I'll take it out and show it to you. So as you can see, it has the iconic pattern of Tropic straps from the 1960s. This strap is scented. It smells of vanilla, which is absolutely gorgeous. And as you can see on the top side, we have the textured finish, also fully perforated. Now, the perforations are very aesthetically pleasing. They also make the strap very soft and supple. The other benefit of the full perforations is that they allow for sweat and perspiration to wick away from the wrist. They also allow for the strap to dry out quickly because they allow for seawater to wick away from the wrist. On the underside, we've also got the iconic Tropic pattern, and this allows for air circulation and also for seawater to wick away from the wrist. So they dry out very quickly, that's the benefit, and also the perforations allow for plenty of adjustment for the tang to engage. This will fit from a minimum 6-inch wrist size up to a maximum 8-inch wrist size. And if you look closely, just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus on it, you can see it's embossed with a Tropic logo by the spring bar end. This denotes that this is a genuine Tropic strap, not a copy, not a replica. Also says 20mm, which is the lug width. I'll show you the buckle and tang side. Good attention to detail. On the underside it's signed with a Tropic logo, and there's a TM in the top right corner of Tropic, and this again denotes that it's trademarked. This is a genuine Tropic strap. And on the exterior we also have the T in the circle emblem of Tropic. So solid 316L grade stainless steel buckle and tang. Brushed satin finish to the top side, underside and flanks, and we've got a large mirror polished bevel which marks the transition between the body and the flanks. No sharp edges, no sharp corners, nice heavy gauge. It's going to be durable and robust, correctly proportioned, looks visually exactly the same as a 1960s Tropic rubber strap. Two sliding keepers, they're not fixed and they're correctly proportioned, and again the underside has the iconic Tropic formation to it, and it's moulded with a 3D effect, allows for air circulation, fully perforated, very comfortable, and again it's signed with the Tropic logo at the spring bar end. Very soft and supple, both the buckle and tang side and the other end. Now this is made from FKM floor rubber, so to clarify, FKM floor rubber is a compromise. It sits between natural rubber and NBR, nitrile butadiene rubber, and also silicone rubber. So silicone rubber is more soft and supple. That's the positive. However, the negative of silicone rubber is it's not as durable and robust. Often silicone rubber straps have a tendency to split and crack around the spring bar end with regular daily wear and tear. That's the negative. They are soft and supple, but they're not durable. Natural rubber is harder and more durable. NBR or nitrile butadiene rubber is harder and more durable. However, the negative of NBR or nitrile butadiene rubber is it is stiff, and therefore it's not as soft and supple as silicone rubber. In between the two, in between nitrile butadiene and silicone rubber respectively, we have FKM floor rubber, and it really is a compromise between the two. It's the very best of both because it is soft and supple like a silicone rubber strap, but it's also durable and robust with daily wear and tear as per natural rubber or NBR nitrile butadiene rubber. Nitrile butadiene rubber is often used in the aeronautical and automotive industries because it is acid resistant, chemical resistant and UV light resistant. It's also a popular material for watch straps because of the aforementioned reasons: chemical resistant, acid resistant and UV light resistant. It's very durable. It is stiffer than FKM floor rubber. FKM floor rubber is not as soft and supple as silicone, but it's more soft and supple than NBR or nitrile butadiene. So it really sits between the two. I like that it's durable and I like it's robust, but I also like it's soft and supple. And correct choice for a Tropic strap, and good to see a genuine Tropic strap used rather than a copy or replica of it. Now, if the Tropic strap's not your personal taste, I'm pleased to report that Aquastar also offer this piece on an isofrane rubber strap, and I previously showed that in my review of the Heritage 1 version, and they're both the same price. So to remind you, on the Tropic rubber strap and also on the isofrane rubber strap, the price is €1,349. They're the same price. The Beads of Rice bracelet version is €1,449 respectively. So you have the choice: Tropic rubber strap or isofrane rubber strap. The Tropic straps are genuine Tropic straps. The isofrane rubber straps are genuine isofrane. So, as I've detailed, this is a scaled down proportion of the Heritage 1, which is a heritage reissue of the original Aquastar Benthos 500 produced in 1970. So the Heritage 1 is 42mm, same as the original. This is scaled down. The tonneau case is 40mm case diameter. We have a lug-to-lug measurement of 45mm. We have a thickness of 12.4mm and a lug width of 20mm. The Beads of Rice bracelet is straight and parallel. It does not taper. It's 20mm at the lugs and 20mm at the flip lock clasp. This is a notable difference in specification I want you to be mindful of. So to clarify, the Heritage 1 version, which I previously reviewed, has a taper on the Beads of Rice bracelet. Same 20mm lug width, but however, the Beads of Rice bracelet tapers from 20 at the lugs down to 18 at the micro adjustment clasp. This is a notable difference. Slight taper, 20 to 18. The Heritage 2 is straight and parallel, 20 at the lugs, 20 at the flip lock clasp, does not have a taper. Now, I'm not going to be critical of this because we have a smaller head of the piece. The tonneau case is 40 and therefore it's lighter, it lacks heft, and therefore one could subjectively say, well, the bracelet needs more meat in order to balance the head of the piece. Why does it need more meat? Well, this version, the Heritage 2, uses the early version clasp, which is a flip lock clasp. It's pressed stainless steel versus milled stainless steel. It's not a micro adjustment clasp. It has 4 micro adjustment holes in the flanks. So to clarify, the clasp is lighter, therefore the bracelet is lighter. So Aquastar have made the bracelet straight and parallel to add some meat to it. Rather than tapering from 20 to 18, it is straight and parallel, 20 to 20. Visually, I don't think it's aesthetically pleasing. I like some taper, and especially on this Heritage 1 version, it needs to have a taper because, of course, there's a lot of meat to the head of the piece. The tonneau case is heavy, and therefore it needs a lighter bracelet. So visually, I think the 20 to 18 looks more aesthetically pleasing. I think Aquastar should consider increasing the taper on this. Rather than having straight 20 to 20 beads of rice bracelet, they should use a 20 to 18 as per the Heritage 1 version. But this is subjective. Some collectors might prefer the straight beads of rice bracelet. So as I've detailed, this has the earlier version of the clasp. It's a flip lock clasp signed on the mirror polished flip lock to a good standard with high definition engraving of the iconic Aquastar star emblem. 4 micro adjustment holes give adequate adjustment, but however I think they could refine it better by adding additional half links on the 6 and the 12 o'clock side, because sometimes adding or subtracting one full link from a beads of rice bracelet does not give the desired fit. However, we do have 1 half link on the 12 side and 1 half link on the 6 side. That does help with sizing it, but of course, needless to say, the 2-button push micro adjustment clasp used on the Heritage 1 is superior. This is a notable upgrade, and I'm hoping that Aquastar also introduce this ratcheting mechanism micro adjustment clasp on both the Heritage 1 and the Heritage 2, because it's a solid milled body, finishing is excellent, and of course the 10mm of on the fly adjustment is excellent. However, subjectively, some collectors, purist Aquastar collectors, might appreciate this being vintage looking. It does look like the flip lock clasp used on vintage pieces from the 1960s, 1970s and 1980s, and of course the original Benthos 500 was produced in 1970. That would have used a similar beads of rice bracelet with this kind of flip lock clasp with micro adjustment holes in the flanks. It's subjective, it depends on which you prefer. I prefer the micro adjustment clasp used on the Heritage 1. We have a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver mirror polished applied indices and silver mirror polished baton handset. Now there's a notable difference between the two. They both have contrasting orange second hands, which are very aesthetically pleasing, but however, on this Heritage 2, Aquastar have changed the second hand. So, to clarify, on this Heritage 1, you can see it has the original Benthos 500 triangle tip to it, which is fluorescent orange, and you can see very aesthetically pleasing as per the original. This handset will particularly appeal to purist Aquastar collectors because it's true to the original handset from the 1970 Benthos 500. However, one has to appreciate this is a scaled down version, has a smaller dial diameter, smaller chapter ring, therefore smaller handset, and one could argue that the triangle tip to the contrasting orange second hand would look too large and therefore not correctly proportioned with this smaller dial diameter, because this is a 40mm tonneau case versus the 42, and of course the dial diameter is much smaller, handset needs to be smaller. It does look very aesthetically pleasing because it's contrasting orange, and it contrasts very well with the printed indices, the applied indices at 12, 9, 6 and 3, and of course the black dial. Now, with regards to the bezel, it's ceramic and it's fully lumed with X1 superluminova, and it's got a patina tone which is called Old Radium, and as you can see, good colour tone match between the lume on the bezel, the indices and the handset. And I like the patina tone of it. It looks rather like tritium lume, which is patinated and developed a patina from the 1970s. So aesthetically pleasing, it does visually look like a 1970s Benthos 500 with tritium lume that has developed a patina. Black dial contrasts very well with the handset and also the printed indices and the applied indices at 12, 9, 6 and 3. I like the symmetry of the dial. Now, subjectively, one could be critical of the lack of a date complication because this is powered by the Sellita Caliber SW200-1 automatic, which, as you know, has a date complication. Some collectors would argue the SW200 has a date, so therefore this should have a date window at 3 o'clock or 6. They should use the date complication, but it's been deleted, and you can see we've got perfect symmetry of the dial. Subjectively, purist Aquastar collectors would argue the original Benthos 500 from 1970 did not have a date complication. This is true to the original dial layout. The symmetry is good versus an asymmetrical dial with a date window at 3 o'clock. I like it. I think although it's SW200-1 powered, it is acceptable not to use the date complication because the symmetry of the dial is aesthetically pleasing as per the original. Now, it may come as a surprise to you. The tonneau case on this piece is not made from 316L grade stainless steel. And I'll clarify, the tonneau case on this Heritage 1 version, which I previously reviewed, is also not made from 316L grade stainless steel. Both of these tonneau cases are actually made from 904L stainless steel. And you'll all be familiar with 904L stainless steel because it's used by Rolex. Rolex call 904L oyster steel. And it's very impressive, and I want to give due credit to Aquastar because one has to remember these are both mid-tier pieces. So to clarify, mid-tier is €500 to €5,000 price point. It's very unusual for a Swiss-made piece not to use 316L grade stainless steel, which is the industry standard. 904L stainless steel is more expensive, and of course it's used by Rolex and they call it oyster steel. One only sees 904L stainless steel with high tier pieces usually, and to clarify, high tier is €5,000 plus price point. This piece is €1,449 on the beads of rice bracelet. Very impressive to see 904L stainless steel. Visually, there's no discernible difference. In terms of the tone, it doesn't look more grey or more silver than 316L grade stainless steel. The luster of the sunburst finishing to the top of the tonneau case looks exactly the same. So visually you cannot tell the difference. For example, 904L does not look more grey and 316L grade does not look more silver. But however, they do have different carbon contents, and in terms of scratch resistance they have the same scratch resistance. In terms of corrosion resistance they have the same rating. So there's no technical advantage to using 904L versus 316L. Visually, aesthetically they look the same. There's no discernible difference. They both have the same silver tone, and when they're brush satin finished into the same luster, you can see you could not tell this is not 316L. But nonetheless, very impressive to see 904L used on a mid-tier piece, not a high-tier piece at €5,000 plus. The bezel is gear tooth profile, aggressive profile to it, and as per the original, the profiling to the gear teeth looks exactly the same as the original Benthos 500 from 1970, which this is a heritage reissue of. Low profile. Now, subjectively, one could be critical of the use of a ceramic bezel insert. From the perspective of a purist Aquastar collector, they would prefer this had an aluminium bezel insert, as per the original. Of course, the original did not have a fully loomed ceramic bezel insert. The benefit of ceramic is, needless to say, it's harder and more scratch resistant than Bakelite, which was used in the 1960s and 1970s, and also aluminium bezel inserts, which were used in the 1960s and 1970s. Visually, it does look aesthetically similar to the original Benthos 500 because we have the 60-minute ticks, rather like a Rolex 5517 milsub, the hour markers, the triangle, and also the Arabic numerals 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. However, they've done a very good job of this ceramic because they've engraved it with high definition engraving with the minute ticks and the Arabic numerals, and they have infilled the engraving to a good standard with X1 Superluminova in an old radium tone, which is patina tone. So it looks very good. Markings are correct as per the original Benthos 500, but of course harder and more scratch resistant. Same applies to the flat sapphire crystal. Needless to say, it's harder and more scratch resistant than acrylic, which was used in the 1970s. And that's the benefit. Also has AR coating, which reduces the glare and the reflective nature. Clarity is also enhanced. One doesn't get the magnification effect and distortion effect of a thick acrylic crystal. There is another notable difference in the specification I want you to be mindful of. So, to clarify, the Heritage 1, which I previously reviewed, has the same 500 metre water resistance as the original Benthos 500 from 1970, and that was an historically important piece because it was the first dive watch in the world to have 500 metres of water resistance without using a monoblock case. 500 metres of water resistance in 1970 wasn't impressive for a monoblock case piece, but this was impressive because it was the first watch in the world to have 500 metres with a screw-down caseback. At that point, 200 metres and 300 metres were the limit of screw-down caseback pieces. In order to attain 500 metres, one had to use a monoblock case in order to withstand the additional pressure. But you can see, this is made to the same specification. This Heritage reissue of it, the Heritage 1, which I previously reviewed, has the same 500 metre water resistance. However, the negative is it does have a thicker flat sapphire crystal and a thicker caseback on the Heritage 1 versus the Heritage 2. The thicker sapphire crystal is necessary in order to prevent it cracking under 500 meters of pressure. The thicker stainless steel caseback is necessary to prevent it distorting under 500 meters of pressure. So it provides a hermetic seal to 500 meters, as does the sapphire crystal. Now, the benefit of this piece being 300 meters versus 500 is it has a thinner sapphire crystal, also has a thinner rehort, and that's something I want you to be mindful of because the rehort improves the legibility. So what it means is the lower profile rehort in this Heritage 2 means the sapphire crystal sits closer to the cannon pinion and the contrasting orange second hand and the dial. So therefore legibility and clarity is improved because the crystal is closer to the hands, closer to the dial, and also the lower profile stainless steel rehort below the sapphire crystal looks aesthetically pleasing. To compare, needless to say, this has a thicker sapphire crystal, as I've detailed, also has a deeper rehort, and you can see the dial and the cannon pinion and the handset are sunk deeper away from the underside of the thicker sapphire crystal. Now, because there's a flat sapphire crystal versus a double dome sapphire crystal or box top pack crystal, this doesn't add additional thickness more than it needs to. It's actually a thin 500 meter water resistant sapphire crystal. It provides 500 meters of hermetic seal, but the point is we don't have 2 millimeters of additional thickness protruding above the top of the ceramic bezel insert as per a box top pack crystal or a double dome sapphire crystal, but it is a thick crystal and the dial is sunk deeper. The rehort is much thicker, as you can see, so that's something to bear in mind. The dial does look deeper sunk beneath the sapphire crystal with the Heritage 1. I prefer this Heritage 2 because you can see the rehort is much more slender, and of course the dial is closer to the underside of the sapphire crystal, the handset is closer to the underside, legibility is improved, aesthetically more pleasing. So this is the notable difference: 300 meters water resistance for the Heritage 2, 500 meters water resistance for the Heritage 1 as per the original. There are two notable differences with regards to the case backs, so we'll look at both of those because it does affect the fit and the comfort level. Now, I did show this in my Heritage 1 review, but I'll show you again to remind you. So, this case back visually looks more similar to the original Benthos 500 case back made in 1970, and as you can see it has scalloped teeth around the circumference, longitudinal brushed satin finishing to the centre section. It's laser etched with the iconic Aquastar star emblem, Aquastar cursive text logo and Benthos in the original font. Circumference is engraved with high definition engraving with a specification, reference number of the piece, and also details that it's a limited edition, number 18 of 500. So to remind you, both the Heritage 1 and Heritage 2 versions you're looking at are limited editions. They are limited numbered editions of 500 pieces. The serial number is the number of 500. This is number 18 of 500. Engraving is high definition and sharp, but it doesn't feel rough. It's been mirror polished to flawless standard. Quality of the caseback finishing is excellent. Now you can see the benefits. It's a very flat caseback. It's not a deep bubble back caseback. 300 meters is strong specification, but although it's powered by the SW200-1, it doesn't have the usual deep bubble back caseback one expects. It still provides adequate clearance between the caseback and the rotor. The rotor doesn't foul it, but it's a nice flat center section. This improves the comfort level and the feel good factor. The benefit of this caseback not being very deep and bubble back profile is this piece is significantly thinner than the Heritage 1. It's only 12.4. Anything below 13mm is impressive for a 300 meter water resistant piece powered by the SW200-1, which is a thick caliber. So I'm very impressed by this, and this is the benefit of it having a flat sapphire crystal versus a box top pack crystal or double dome sapphire crystal, which would add 2mm of thickness to the piece. So although it does have a tonneau case, which does add thickness, the flat sapphire crystal is low profile, the case back is low profile. 12.4 is very impressive for 300 meters. One would expect this to be 13 plus. Now contrast this with the Heritage 1. This is far thicker, but of course it's 500 meters versus 300. It does need to be thicker sapphire crystal, thicker caseback. But let's look at the caseback specifically. As you can see, different caseback design. One could say more contemporary, although it does have a forged caseback, which is very aesthetically pleasing. It's hydraulically pressed with Aquastar Swiss and also the iconic emblem. Mirror polishing is flawless, milled slots are flawless. But you can see far deeper. Now, depth is necessary, not in order to clear the rotor. The reason for the depth is the caseback needs to be thicker stainless steel because it needs to be thick enough to withstand 500 meters of pressure without distorting and breaking the hermetic seal. So you can see the difference. It's a far deeper caseback. Now the problem with this is it makes the tonneau case sit further away from the wrist rather than snug to the wrist. So I'm going to show you the other one again. You can see the depth of that. 500 meters is very strong specification as per the original. It is necessary, but you can see the benefit of this being 300. Yes, you sacrifice 200 meters of water resistance, but what you gain is it reduces the thickness of this piece down from 16.2 on the Heritage 1 down to only 12.4. 12.4 is very low profile for 300 meters. So aesthetically, I prefer the forged caseback on the Heritage 1, but in terms of profiling, I prefer the flat caseback used on the Heritage 2. Right, so let's test the bezel execution. Now, this is a notable upgrade or difference to the original Benthos 500 from 1970. The original version had a 60-click unidirectional bezel, which was the industry standard in the 1970s. Also, dive pieces from the 1970s often used bidirectional friction bezels because they predated the use of 60-click bezels. But from 1970 onwards, clicking bezels became in use. They became the industry standard and they succeeded bidirectional friction bezels. So they had a click spring engaging with the 60 grooves. This has been updated by Aquastar to modern day contemporary specification. It now has 120 clicks. Now, purist Aquastar collectors will be critical of this because they would prefer it had the same 60 clicks of the original 1970 Benthos 500. However, modern day collectors will appreciate it has the modern day 120 clicks. So let's test the execution. Nice loud audible clicks. Medium resistance, doesn't feel too heavy, doesn't feel too firm and solid, but it feels reliable and robust. You can hear the click spring positively engaging with 120 grooves machined into the underside of the gear tooth profile bezel. Nice loud audible clicks. Feels solid, feels robust, feels smooth, doesn't feel rough or gritty, doesn't get lighter or heavier, feels even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation. So sounds good, feels good. No lateral side-to-side play whatsoever, no back play whatsoever. Nice and tight, but not too tight. Medium resistance rather than being too solid, as per a Steinhardt Ocean 139, for example, which you may be familiar with. That has a very tight bezel. Some collectors would say too tight because the mechanism is very tight. This is lighter, feels medium resistant. So let's just check the alignment. One more click. I've gone too far. I'll go back again. Just bear with me and I'll get it correct. One more click. Perfect. The fully loomed triangle on the ceramic bezel insert perfectly aligns with the 12 o'clock index on the dial and the 60-minute tick on the chapter ring. So this is an example to other mid-tier brands of how to get bezel execution correct. Medium firm resistance, no lateral side-to-side play, no back play, feels even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation, doesn't get lighter or heavier, perfect alignment. It's fantastic. Feels good, sounds good. And I like that it's 120 click versus the 60 click of the original. Now, as you can see on the right hand flank, we have two crowns. The lower crown is actually a helium escape valve. So if you look, you can see it's embossed with HE, which denotes helium. And if you look at the top crown, this is embossed with the Aquastar iconic star emblem. Mirror polished caps to both, and the embossing of HE is excellent, and the embossing of the star emblem is excellent. Both coin edge and large chamfers which delete the sharp tips to the coin edge teeth, both correctly proportioned, partially recessed into the right hand flank of the tonneau case. So they're large enough to be grippy and tactile, easy to get good purchase with your index finger and thumb. Even if you're wearing a wetsuit and a rubber glove and your hand is wet and slippery, you can still get good purchase with your index finger and thumb with a gloved hand on both the top crown for setting the time and manually winding, and the lower crown, which is the helium escape valve. So let's check the helium escape valve firstly. Silky smooth. There's a perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube, and the helium escape valve just needs minimal number of turns to fully unscrew. This is excellent. Very unusual to see a helium escape valve on a 300 meter water resistant piece. So why does it have a helium escape valve? Because it's rated to 300 versus 500 as per the Heritage 1. Well, originally the Benthos 500 from 1970 had a mono pusher at the 4 o'clock position. And of course, the SW200-1 does not support that mechanism added to the movement. It does not support a mono pusher or, for example, a stopwatch function or complication to the second hand. So this doesn't have a mono pusher, but visually it does give the aesthetic of the Benthos 500 because we have 2 crowns versus 1 crown for setting the time as per the Heritage 1, which I've showed you. I like it. It looks good because it's symmetrical, as you can see. They're evenly spaced, and also the proportions are the same. The helium escape valve and also the crown look exactly the same in proportions. They're both recessed to the same depth and they're both the same diameter. So let's test screwing it back down. Silky smooth. Immediate thread pickup between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So helium escape valve works well. And 300 meters of hermetic seal is strong specification, and aesthetically it looks very good. I like the symmetry of the 2 crowns on the right hand flank. Visually it does look similar to the Benthos 500, which had a mono pusher and a crown, and it's good. Now subjectively, purist Aquastar collectors might be critical that this is a helium escape valve. The original Benthos 500 did not have it, but of course they can opt for this piece, the Heritage 1. And as you can see, it just has the crown at the 10 o'clock position. We do not have the mono pusher. So there is that there. If they don't like, if purist Aquastar collectors want a piece which looks exactly the same, a pure Heritage reissue, they can opt for the Heritage 1, which is in the original dimensions and also just has the 1 crown versus the mono pusher. They've deleted it. I like this. I think it's good. Helium escape valve is aesthetically pleasing, and of course it works. Now let's check the screw down crown for the time. Silky smooth, minimal number of turns required to fully unscrew it, perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. 300 meters, again, is strong specification. I like the proportions of it, feels grippy and tactile. Pulling it out to the final click hacks the movement. If you look at the contrasting orange second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead, so therefore it's possible to set the time precisely to the second with this Solita caliber SW200-1 automatic. So we're now in the time setting position. Feels smooth, clockwise and anti-clockwise, doesn't feel rough or gritty. I'm just going to check the manual winding. Feels smooth, doesn't feel rough or gritty. There's no discernible difference between manually winding an ETA 2824-2, which this SW200-1 is a clone of, and the Soprod caliber P024, which is also a clone of the aforementioned. The 3 movements, the ETA 2824-2, the P024 and the SW200-1 feel exactly the same to manually wind. They don't feel rough or gritty, they feel smooth. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. So manual winding feels good, hacking the movement works well, setting the time feels smooth, both clockwise and anti-clockwise. The meshing of the gearing is excellent, feels nice and robust. Minimal backplay. When you rotate the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, there's an almost immediate response to the baton minute hand. Hands are correctly proportioned. Visually, they look aesthetically pleasing. They are true to the original design. The only difference is, as I've detailed, the orange second hand on the H2 or Heritage 2 doesn't have the triangle tip. Purists will dislike that. Contemporary collectors will appreciate it's correctly proportioned. So it works very well. Slight back play, which is okay. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the contrasting orange second hand. You can see it sweeps around the dial at the characteristic 4 Hz smooth sweep. Let's test screwing the crown back down. Instant thread pickup, perfect pickup, or both threads mate very well. The internal thread picks up very well with the external thread of the crown tube. So 300 meters is strong specification. Crown is sublime. Screw down crown execution, silky smooth. Helium escape valve is sublime, silky smooth. Excellent. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot of both pieces. Now, I did this before in my Heritage 1 review, but if you haven't seen it, or to remind you, I'll do it again, because the other notable difference between the specifications is 300 meters versus 500, but the other notable difference is the thickness and the lug to lug. These are things I want you to be mindful of, specifically for a collector with a smaller wrist size of 6 to 7 inches. So, to clarify, this piece is significantly thinner because it has a thinner sapphire crystal in the front, thinner screw down stainless steel case back in the back. So, the Heritage 1 is thick. It is far thicker at 16.2 millimeters. This piece is far more low profile. It is only 12.4 millimeters. So 12.4 versus 16.2, 500 meters versus 300. These are what you need to consider. There's also a difference in the lug to lug measurement of the tonneau case. So This one has a shorter case, it's more compact. It's 45mm lug to lug. This will be particularly suitable if you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist. 45 is compact, so to clarify, I often refer to 48mm as the perfect sweet spot, the perfect lug to lug measurement for all wrist sizes, 6 to 7 and 7 to 8 inch wrists respectively. 48 is the industry standard for good reason. It is the perfect sweet spot for all wrist sizes. At 45, it is 3mm below the sweet spot. But even on my large 8-inch wrist, you can see the curved undercut to the tonneau case wraps around the wrist very well. And there's a nice snug fit to the beads of rice bracelet. So, wraps around the wrist very well. Doesn't sit on top of the wrist like a thick slab of 316L grade stainless steel. The other benefit of this being only 12.4 is, you'll know this from my previous reviews, anything below 13mm is the sweet spot. This means this piece will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts, therefore it's a practical daily wear piece. At 12.4 it's 0.6mm below the 13mm sweet spot. Very practical. On the 20 to 20 straight beads of rice bracelet, it feels balanced. Despite being a hefty piece, that's something to note. This is 169 grams, but bear in mind, it does have a long beads of rice bracelet. I can easily slide an index finger beneath a bracelet and clasp at all times. This indicates the bracelet will fit up to an 8.5 inch wrist size. So, to clarify, there are enough removable links on the 6 o'clock and the 12 o'clock side of the bracelet to size this down to a minimum 6 inch wrist size. And of course, it will go up to a maximum 8.5 inch wrist size. But bear in mind, it's on the position 4 out of 4 micro adjustments on the clasp. This is at its absolute limit. So 6 inches to 8.5, plenty of links to fit around a wetsuit if you have a larger wrist, and of course 20 to 20 gives a nice straight look. One could say 20 to 18 will look more aesthetically pleasing, but as I've detailed, the heft is necessary on the bracelet to balance the heft of the tonneau case. Feels balanced, but the only thing I'd like to see Aquastar do is upgrade it or update it to the micro adjustment clasp, because you can see this is better quality. Now it will add some heft to the piece because of course the micro adjustment clasp is solid milled versus pressed body, and of course it's heavier and larger, but I think that what Aquastar should do is introduce this micro adjustment clasp and also introduce the 20 to 18 taper bracelet used on this Heritage 1, because it's visually more aesthetically pleasing, but also the clasp is superior because we have ratcheting micro adjustment versus the 4 micro adjustment holes in the light gauge pressed flip lock clasp used on this piece. However, purist Aquastar collectors might appreciate this has a vintage look of a 1970s flip lock clasp, and of course they were using flip lock clasps in the 1970s with this kind of holes in the flanks plus light gauge of pressed body clasp versus solid milled. Finishing is excellent, beautiful luster to it, contrasting mirror polishing to the flip lock, which is signed with the emblem. No sharp edges to the top edge or the low edge, doesn't have sharp corners, profiling is good, curvature is good. So this clasp will fit you if you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist. Nice curvature, doesn't have too much length or overhang to the clasp, and it doesn't look too wide, it's not too bulky. Visually it does look vintage, so it does fit the aesthetic of this being a heritage reissue. Feel good factor is excellent, comfort level is excellent. Now, to contrast, I'll give you another wrist shot of the Heritage 1 and you can see the difference. So this is thinner at 12.4, also has a shorter lug to lug at 45, and of course lacks heft, it's 169 grams. This is significantly more heft, it's 205, but I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see the difference. So straight away I would say the Heritage 2 is better suited for a 6 to 7 inch wrist, mainly due to the shorter lug to lug. The Heritage 2 is 45, this Heritage 1 is 47, so it's 1mm below the sweet spot. Now you can see the difference in thickness. This is visually taller, also feels taller. Doesn't feel like a thick slab of 316L grade stainless steel, but you can really feel the wrist presence. It does dominate the wrist, and clearly this is best intended or best suited for collectors with an 8 inch plus wrist size. If you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist, clearly the Heritage 2 is the correct choice. If you have an 8 inch plus large wrist size, you may enjoy the wrist presence, and of course this does have the exact same dimensions as the original Benthos 500 from 1970. Therefore, purist Aquastar collectors will prefer this, because visually it does look and feel like the original from 1970. Same tonneau case proportions, same thickness, same 500 meters. And it is updated to modern day specification with the sapphire crystal and ceramic bezel insert, but visually it looks exactly the same as the Benthos 500. I prefer the taper 20 to 18, and as I've detailed, I prefer the micro adjustment clasp. I'd like to see this micro adjustment clasp introduced to the Heritage 2. The 10mm of on-the-fly adjustment is good, profiling is good, finishing is fantastic, and it's high quality. So I'd like to see this introduced, and I'd also like to see this 20 to 18 bracelet introduced, because visually I think the taper looks better than the straight 20 to 20 parallel bracelet used on the Heritage 2, but this is subjective. It depends on which you prefer, straight or tapered beads of rice bracelet. So, more wrist presence. Now, the thing to note is it is hefty at 205 grams versus the 169 grams of the Heritage 2, but very long bracelet. This will fit up to a 9-inch plus wrist size. So, even around the wetsuit, you're going to be removing several of the links to fit a 6 to 7 or a 7 to 8 inch wrist. That will reduce the heft of the piece down to circa 180 grams. But taper looks good, 20 to 18. It does need some meat on the bracelet to balance the 42mm tonneau case. So as I've detailed, one thing I like about both of these, the Heritage 1 and Heritage 2, is the sunburst finishing to the luster to the top of the tonneau case. It's gorgeous the way it catches the light. And the cases are both made from 904L stainless steel versus 316L, as I've detailed. But in terms of luster, there's no discernible difference. It looks the same as the silver tone of 316L. But I love the sunburst pattern to it. Rather than just concentric CNC lathe tool machining it, mirror polishing it, or just brush satin finishing it longitudinally, this sunburst pattern or sunburst finish to the top of the tonneau case, both on the Heritage 1 and Heritage 2, it's beautiful. And I really like it. Right, so let's do a Lume test, and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. This is stellar performance. So this uses X1 Superluminova on the ceramic bezel insert, the indices, and also the baton handset. Now, in daylight, they both have, all three places, the bezel, the dial, and the hands, all have the same patina tone to the X1 Superluminova, which they call Old Radium. It looks like tritium, which has developed a patina, and really it does look like a 1970s Benthos 500 with tritium lume that has aged or patinated. So, very aesthetically pleasing. Now, in the dark, it has the same green tone on the bezel, the dial, and the hands. So we've got applied indices at 12, 9, 6, and 3, and then printed indices at the other hour marks. But you can see we're looking at a full 5 to 6 layers. This is excellent. Often mid-tier brands, and to remind you, mid-tier is €500 to €5,000 price points. Often mid-tier brands, as a production cost-cutting measure in order to maximise profit margin per piece, they use the production cost-cutting measure of applying 2 to 3 layers on the dial or 3 to 4 layers on the handset or bezel versus the industry standard 5 to 6. And 5 to 6 is optimum. But I'm pleased to see that Aquastar haven't done that. You can clearly see this is 5 to 6 on the ceramic bezel insert, 5 to 6 on the indices, 5 to 6 on the handset. Perfect colour tone match. The exciter has potency and it's glowing brightly. X1 has a lighter green tone to it than C3, but visually it does look similar. So it has a similar green tone to tritium, and I like it. I think they've made the correct decision by not using BGW9, which would glow blue. That would be more contemporary. C3 does have that vintage aesthetic of tritium, which glowed green. And as you can see, this is the benefit of not having a date complication, because we've got a symmetrical dial versus asymmetrical. There is no date complication at 3 or 6, and therefore we have the applied indices at 12, 9, 6, and 3. With symmetry. So I'm not going to be critical of this not having a date complication, even though the SW200-1 does have a date complication. This is good. It's true to the original, the symmetrical dial of the Benthos 500 from 1970. Excellent performance, and I really like the green tone, very aesthetically pleasing. Right, so let's discuss the movement use, because it's my favourite aspect of the piece. You will all be familiar with the Sellita caliber SW200-1, which is a reliable, well-proven workhorse Swiss caliber. So this uses the Elaboré grade of SW200-1. It's a clone of the ETA 2824-2. The architecture of both movements is the same. The only difference is the SW200-1 has an additional jewel added. It has 26 jewels versus the 25 jewels of the ETA 2824-2, which it is a clone of. It runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz, has hand winding and hacking, which use for complications, and they work well as I've demonstrated. Has a quick set date complication. Now, subjectively, as I've detailed, the negative is we're not using the date complication here because there is no date window at 3 o'clock or 6, but however I'm not going to be critical of it because it retains the symmetry of the dial as I've detailed, and of course this will particularly appeal to purist Aquastar collectors. The dial layout is exactly the same as the Benthos 500 from 1970. Had they added a date complication at 3 or 6, it would have made it an asymmetrical dial and therefore spoiled the symmetry of the dial. This is true to the original. It's a heritage reissue. I think they've made the correct decision by deleting the date complication. So we don't use the date complication. As it's an elaborate grade, it's regulated in 3 positions, to plus or minus 7 to plus or minus 20 seconds per day. So rather wide accuracy range, plus or minus 7 to plus or minus 20. However, I'm pleased to report that Aquastar are doing a good job of regulating the SW200-1s they're using. This one is running consistently at plus 2 seconds per day when it's fully wound to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. Plus 2 is actually within cost chronometer limits of minus 4 to plus 6, so it's excellent. To regulate to plus or minus 7 to plus or minus 20 in 3 positions isn't very impressive for an elaborate grade, that's the standard. But to exceed that and regulate it to chronometer grade between minus 4 and plus 6 is impressive. Plus 2 is excellent accuracy. So chronometer accurate, 40 hours power reserve is excellent. And hand winding works well, hacking works well, setting the time works well. Correct choice of movement at this price point in the mid-tier, €1,449 on the Bezel bracelet. I like the SW200-1, you'll know this from my previous reviews. In terms of quality, reliability, build quality, quality control, materials and accuracy, there's no discernible difference between the SW200-1, the ETA 2824-2 and the Soprod caliber P024. The elaborate grade of ETA 2823-2 and SW200-1, they are the same. So no difference in quality, and I have no reservations about the reliability of it. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse Swiss caliber. I really like the SW200-1. Feels smooth to manually wind, feels good to hack and set the time, and it's accurate. Plus 2 is outstanding. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meets 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price points. So as I've detailed, this piece is available in 2 versions. On the Tropic rubber strap, the price is €1,349. Same price on the Tropic rubber strap. On the Bezel bracelet, the price is €1,449. Yes, I'm going to declare it excellent quality, and yes, I'm going to declare it excellent value at €1,449. What we're looking at here is a quality Swiss-made piece with a quality Swiss-made movement, and of course it does have the brand heritage. Aquastar have been making dive pieces since the 1960s. They have that pedigree, that brand heritage behind it. This is a heritage reissue of the original Aquastar Benthos 500 from 1970, made to modern day specification. Aquastar have got it correct, the balance correct between vintage aesthetic of a 1970s looking piece but updated to modern day specification. Ceramic bezel insert, sapphire crystal with AR coating, X1 Superlume Nova, and an excellent movement, the SW200-1. No quality control defects whatsoever. The build quality, quality control, finishing are stellar. Bezel execution is excellent. Screw down crown and helium escape valve execution are excellent. 300 meters is strong specification, and above all else, what I like about this piece versus the Heritage one is the lack of thickness. 12.4 millimeters is very impressive for a tonneau case, 300 meter piece with the SW200-1. I would expect this to be 13 plus. They deserve credit for reducing this down to only 12.4. Outstanding piece. I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for lemonade money. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Aquastar Benthos Heritage 2. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.